Okay, so this video is going to deal with just simply writing the equation of a parallel line. I know some videos usually link these two together with parallel perpendicular, but we're just going to stick with parallel. So, one of the things you need to know here is basically this idea that you have a fact, and your fact is parallel lines have identical rates of change. So, a couple things here. There are a couple equations. So if we have y equals mx plus b, what we need to know is that the coefficient of x, so what I mean by that in this case would be the m. Okay, so m is my rate of change in this case, so I'm just going to use ROC. And then I have another formula, depending on what formula your teacher uses. You also have this formula that's called y minus y1, which is, this is the point slope formula, equals m times x minus x1. So if you were to get an equation in this form, again, your rate of change is that m, and then you have this last one, all right, where you have this ax plus by equals c, and this is what we call standard form. And if you have a standard form of equation of a line, if you don't really feel like going through the whole process of rearranging it, so say you're someone who already knows how to rearrange this and write it into y equals mx plus b, there is a shortcut you can take. If you take m, okay, the way you find m would simply be taking -1, multiplying it by whatever the a value is, so whatever the number in front of x is, and divide that answer by b. That will give you m. Okay, like above, m will just be explicitly written there for you, but in ax plus by equals c it is not. So a shortcut in that, okay, to get the slope is you take -1 times a divided by b, and that will come up a little bit later. But, not to deviate, okay, these are all the equations that you kind of deal with when it deals with equations of lines. And what you need to know, again, the most important thing is parallel lines have identical rates of change. This is kind of that piece of information right here that you're going to have to memorize, because you're going to see the word parallel, and then this has to be identical rates of change, has to pop into mind. So let's jump into some examples. So an example of this would be something like such. So write the equation of a line that will be parallel to a line with a slope of 3/5. So essentially, the reason I'm talking about this problem is because I'm telling you that the line you're going to write is going to be parallel to something that already has a slope of 3/5. So your new line that you're about to make, and the equation I'm going to use is y equals mx plus b, so slope-intercept form. It's the most common, what I think, common one used. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to make an equation. So what I need to remember is that my current slope is 3/5. So my new slope of my new line has to match that. So my new line, I'm going to go ahead and replace the m because we talked about before. So y equals 3/5 x. And in this case, I'm just talking about making an equation. So I can put anything here. I can put +3, I can put -5, whatever I want. Okay, there's no other limitations I have to have, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The only reason I want to talk about this again is kind of drill home that fact that your slope, okay, is going to have to be identical here. So this 3/5 is where I place it. So if you find the slope, you're placing the identical one here. So let's jump into something what more realistically would kind of look like. This problem here, okay, this problem here is going to have a little bit more detail. One, okay, it's going to give you an equation in the problem. All right, so just looking at the equation, not even reading it, it's giving me an equation. But more importantly, I now have an extra piece of information, which is a specific point. Now that's going to become important a little bit later, and I'll discuss. So let's read the problem. It says, write the equation of a line parallel to this line and contains the point 15,8. Now, why is that important? Well, my new equation that's going to be parallel to this one, we need to know because the word parallel, my new line, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to ignore the point for now. My new line of y equals mx plus b, point slope form, is going to start out with y equals -2/3 x. Okay, and I'm not going to put the plus or minus whatever thing yet. I don't know what it's going to be. The reason I can't, like before that I just did in the previous slide here, was I put whatever number I want, was because it didn't have the specific points. Now that I have a specific point here, it ties down what specifically b will have to be. One thing I want to talk about is that the coordinate b, okay, the b is created from the coordinate 0 and then whatever b is. Unfortunately, this particular coordinate does not have a 0, okay? So I can't just put plus 8 here. Common mistake is people will take this 8 and place it right here and just say they're done. The problem with that is that b has to be associated with a 0. So what we can do, though, all right, is that if you notice y equals mx plus b, okay, it has 4 variables in the problem. When I started doing this, when I fill in the rate of change, that takes care of one of my variables, right? The nice thing about coordinate pairs here is that coordinate pairs come in this form of x, comma, y. All right? So what this allows me to do is it allows me to fill in this equation a little bit more so that I can find this b that I'm trying to find. So I'm going to do some side work. I'm going to leave this side here, right here, just for my final answer. If you want to work downwards, you can. Like if you want to work straight down from this, you can. So anyway, here we go. We go 8, okay, so why am I placing an 8? Well, from here, okay, the 8 is in place of y. So if you notice up here, okay, 8 is where the y coordinate is, so I'm replacing the y with an 8. So then from here, I get equals, so that slope of negative 2/3 that we had. And now I'm going to multiply that by my x. So again, my x is 15, so wherever I saw x, I'm going to put a 15 down below. So times 15. And then lo and behold, I'm going to just write plus b, because this is the thing I'm trying to figure out. So I go ahead and now I can solve for it, because now I have an equation with just a b left, and anytime I have just one variable left in my problem, I can go ahead and I can solve for that problem. So I get 8 equals negative 10 plus b. Negative 2/3 times 15 is negative 10. So to solve this, I'm going to go ahead and do the addition property of equality. So plus 10, and I get 18 equals b. So now that I have this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in my empty space with that b that's unknown, and it's plus 18. So now what I've created, okay, is this equation that is not only parallel, okay, not only parallel to that, but it also goes through that point. So this is my final equation, and then I'm done. I leave it just like that. Okay, last example. So the last example here is a little bit different than the previous one. So this one is like when I talked about at the very beginning, is ax plus by equals c. So again, I put my little formula here. All right, if I want to do a little cheat sheet, and I'll do both for this particular slide, so this may take a little bit longer than I want to, but I'll show you both ways of what I mean. So all I'm worried about here, all right, is going to be my a and my b. I actually don't care about c. So in this equation, 9 is actually c. So this is a, this is b. So if I want to figure out m very quickly, I can just use this little formula here, okay, a little cheat sheet kind of thing here. You would have to memorize this, so if you don't want to have to memorize something extra, I can show you another way to get to the same answer. It's just actually more work than doing it this way. So here we go. So my a is 2, so I'm going to go m is going to be equivalent to negative 1 times 2. So again, the 2 is coming from the coefficient of x. Divide that by, so now again I'm choosing the number in front of, okay, my y, which is negative 5. So if the minus is there, don't forget the minus has to travel with this very quickly. So I do negative 5. So then I do is I go ahead and just clean this up a little bit. Negative 1 times negative 2 is negative 2 over negative 5. And then from here, I should note that 2 of these make it positive, so my final cleaned up version is 2/5. Okay, so why is this important? Because now I have my slope. I don't necessarily need to do this any other way, but this is just the cheat sheet. The cheat way of kind of doing it's quick little memorization. If you're cool with memorizing stuff, this is a nice little way of doing it. If you're not cool with memorizing stuff, again, at the end, I'll show you how to do it the other way. But anyhow, okay, we're writing the equation of a line parallel to this. So now that I have my slope, I'm just going to go ahead and get back at it normal. So I go y equals mx plus b. I'm using an identical m, so I'm going to go ahead and place this m in that equation. So it becomes y equals 2/5 x. Now I'm a fan of leaving this spot blank for a little bit right here until I figure out the number. So I'm going to do my work over here. So my work over here, again, what we're back to is what we just did before. We take the points for our x's and our y's. So our x is -5, our y is 8, and we plug them into this equation. Much like we took m and replaced m, we can now replace the y and the x if we wanted to. So let's go ahead and do so. So y is 8 equals, so we have 2/5 times -5 plus b. So now again, the nice thing is, if I ever want to solve an equation, I got to get it to the point where it's just one variable, and the variable left is b, which is what I need to know at this point. So now I can go ahead and do so. So 8 is equivalent to, well, 2/5 times -5 is just simply -2 plus b. So I go ahead and use my property of equality, so +2 plus 2, and I get 10 equals b. So that I can go ahead and fill this answer in on that empty slot, and I'll have my final equation of y equals 2/5 x plus 10. So, I'm done. Now, for those of you who don't want to watch the extended version, you can end here. For those of you who want to see how I can change this equation, okay, without using this formula, then stay tuned for a couple of seconds while I erase some things up here. So essentially, okay, we're going to get back to this equation of y equals 2/5 x plus 10 in a second, and I'll show you how we do that. So here we go. So if you're not a fan of using, say, this formula right here that I'm talking about, okay, we don't need to use it, okay, but what you do need to know is that we do need to go ahead and rearrange it. So here we go. So we need to start off with this 2x minus 5y equals 9. And the goal here is that now we need to understand, okay, that we need to get that y by itself. So what we're going to use is just properties of equality. So if you like this method, then you can use this method. So we go ahead, what we're going to do here is we're going to use minus 2x. We do minus 2x on both sides. So what we're attempting to do here is isolate that y that I have highlighted there. So what I get now is I've got, importantly, -5y equals, so again, we're trying to put this y equals mx plus b, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one and write it first, so -2x, and then plus 9, because the 9 is positive, so plus 9. And my last step here is to get y by itself. Okay, don't worry about the right-hand side over here and what it may look like. Okay, we want to focus on how the heck, if I was solving the equation, would I get y by itself? And the answer to that is division. So the way I would do is I would make this -5 and divide it, because I'm trying to make a 1. Well, anything divided by itself is 1. So now what comes down to is this. What I want to do is when I do division, division has to divide everything and divides it all individually. So I just go over here and divide each one of these individually. So then I'm left with y equals, so I clean this up and I get 2/5 with an x, and then I get -9/5. Now, don't worry about this value. It looks ugly, but we don't actually care about it because remember, okay, after I did all this work, one of the things you need to remember is that all I really want is that value out in front of x. So then we follow that same process we went through before. Our new line is going to have an identical slope of y equals 2/5 x, and we write the plus b here, okay, because that's the b I want to figure out. So then I can go ahead now and just follow what we did before and plug these points in. So again, like now we follow last suit here is 8 equals, okay, 2/5 times -5 plus b, and I get 8 equals -2 plus b, property of equality, plus 2, b equals 10. So I have a final answer of y equals 2/5 x plus 10.